Good morning.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm out in this beautiful natural world, so very good. Nice to see you.
It's good to see your face too today, Aisla. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Gaia Gossip today. So, Aisla, we had some exciting events going on, and we wanted to talk about the Women Powering Change this week.
Yeah, you were there, right?
I was there. Oh my God, it was a very long day, and it was a very beautiful and powerful day. Cinda Arsenault has put this event together. I can't remember. I want to say this is the fifth, sixth, maybe year in a row. It started out in her backyard of, she wanted to bring women together who were doing the good work in the world. And we all need to know about each other and do whatever we can do to support each other. And so now it's grown so much that we were at McNichols in Denver, and I don't know how many women were there. Certainly, well over 1,000.
Wow.
Many booths set up, and it was a joyous event, very powerful. There is nothing like being in that kind of environment, recognizing there are other women who are going through the struggles and working and doing the good work for the people in mass, because sometimes when you're in this kind of work, you can feel a bit isolated. You're not sure, am I on the right path? Are others really doing it? Who's struggling? How do you deal with issues when you are having a tough time? And it was a wonderful day to come together and really talk about what's going on and how we can support each other. And we had your son with us that day.
Wow. Yes, I believe he was helping with your booth.
Yes.
It sounded like you guys had a great time. And you went to that first Women Powering Change, didn't you? You've been there from the beginning.
I did. I was at the very first one when Cinda had it in her backyard in Superior, Colorado. Yeah, and I think Myrna was there on that first one as well. I think she was, yeah. So, like I said, it's an amazing, it's wonderful to know that you're on the right track and women are coming together and supporting this particular event, that it's grown so exponentially over the years. It's certainly needed. It did my heart good, I can tell you that much.
It speaks to a bias that I have, which is that there are a lot more people who care and who are genuinely seeking to participate in creating solutions and community. They just don't have the biggest microphone. And so I feel like things like Cinda's event give us a chance to reconnect to that feeling of being in a collective that is working towards better. And I may not know everybody who's on this journey with me, and that I feel like I'm part of a huge human family that is really committed to creating something that works for everybody on the planet. So thank you for introducing me to Women Powering Change and sharing. And folks who are in Colorado, stay tuned. If you sign up for our newsletter, we always put out a little bit of information about it, because it used to be in March, now it was in May. Or you can check out their website and stay in touch, because they really do a lot of great work, and they are genuinely trying to build a stronger collective action towards mutual support, mutual aid, and actual change.
And it's womenpoweringchange.org or .com, I can't remember.
It's .org.
Okay.
And I can make sure that's in the show notes, so that you folks, if you're watching this later, you're like, gosh, I want to get in on that. We got you. So, and then, is there anything you're really excited about that's coming up for Harmony Voices? Or I know generally planning to take a little bit of a pause since we've been running at 100 miles an hour since December.
Well, in general, the organization is taking a pause. I, on the other hand, am far from taking a pause. We're in the process of merging with a couple of companies in the sense of, we have our CBD and hemp products and that kind of thing. And so the Her Many Voices LLC and BV, they are working with two other organizations. We're merging benefits. The products that we sell, it ends up benefiting the foundation. So that is another reason why I'm here in Colorado for this week. And I'm very excited. More will come. I can't talk too much about what's happening. Not all the papers are signed yet, but I'm very excited about what's going on for us. And it's taking us to another level. And as a matter of fact, I wanted to talk about, well, first of all, do you want the good news or the not so good news in the world?
I'd say start with not so good. I like to end on a high note.
Okay, thank you. Me too. All right, so we're always talking about what's going on in the world with Gaia gossip, and there is something wild that has been happening off the Florida coast. Fish are mysteriously spinning in circles and dying, and scientists don't know why. This phenomenon is killing Florida's critically endangered small-toothed sawfish and others as well. The sawtooth used to be more in, I believe it was Texas and like North Carolina area, I believe. And now they have migrated and they're in Florida, and now they're dealing with this issue. And what's heartbreaking is that they were the first fish to be listed in the U.S. Endangered Species Act in 2003. They were starting to come back, and now they're regressing because of this, and it's a big-time mystery. There are a team of experts who are down in Florida, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and I believe it's called Mote Marine Laboratory. They've come together and they're working. Sometimes they are saving these fish at the last minute and helping them with their respiratory issues and getting them to the lab safely and putting them in quarantine to figure out what's going on. But I will say, if there's anyone out there in the marine world and you have any idea of what's going on, please let us know. Or certainly contact the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation people, because it really is, it's heartbreaking. We have different species on this planet that seem to be dealing with a lot of struggles. I have my personal opinions on our impact, the human impact, but it's a curious thing. Now, to speak to the positive that's happening out there, and I'm so excited because this is on the hemp world and the hemp industry. Oregon State received a $10 million grant to work with 13 native tribes in the U.S. To help on hemp economic development. The project focuses on two things. It's creating educational and workforce development opportunities to equip Indigenous students and adults in the states for jobs in the emerging bio-based economy. And it's focused on developing manufacturing capabilities for materials and products made in the hemp industry in Western states. So this is exciting news. I do know a couple of people who are involved in that from the Native community, and this can have major ripple effect on the environment. Hemp is, for those of you who are not aware, it is an amazing protector of the environment. It carbon sequests like nothing else out there, really, and it's a great soil remediator. And it has a whole other host of benefits to us personally and the environment.
Yeah. That is really exciting. I know that that's something you've been passionate about for some time, and I love that people are catching on. They're trendsetter.
Little by little, yes. And we have to keep moving forward with this one. Because it speaks to, I don't know about you, but when we have these kind of issues that are happening in the environment, I stress, and my mental health definitely has an impact or this has an impact on my mental health and those that are around me. And I recognize mostly within the youth, there's a lot of trauma that's going on out there, because what do we do? You know, they recognize that there are all of these issues that are happening on the planet, and what do we do? How do we take care of ourselves and the whole biodiversity? You know, so we make sure that we have a future, and our future ancestors have a future. So I know we have a wonderful guest that's coming on today.
So, speaking of mental health, we have Dr. Janis Whitlock today. She's a developmental psychologist, researcher, educator, and systems consultant. She's been doing this for over 4 decades, which means probably has quite a bit of experience and a depth of things to offer. Very excited to have her today. She's also an emerita research faculty at Cornell University, and talks about mental health, well-being, and nature, which is one of the reasons that she seemed like such a great guest for Gaia Gossip. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say, and I hope you all will stick around and partake.
Welcome, Janis.
Thank
Janis.
And Myrna.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Janis. We're thrilled to have you as our guest on Gaia Gossip today. Thank you so much, Aisela and Alicia, for the intro and the lead-in, and the idea of talking about, mental health as it connects to nature, right? Janis, you're also the founder of the Cornell Research Program on Self-Injury and Recovery. I'd love for you to share, if you'd like to, any more about your background that's relevant to our conversation.
Oh, thank you, Myrna. Yeah, so I really have been working for a really long time, but it's all a labor of love. I mean, I started out after college in the late 80s as an educator and change agent. And I was a sex educator for a really long time, and I loved that, and would have thought I would do that forever. But as you all know, life has other plans sometimes for you than what you have. So I end up going back for a master's in public health, so I can do community level programming, and then end up in a PhD program some number of years later as a developmental psychologist. So and all my research for 25 years between then and now has focused on adolescent and young adult mental health and well-being, with a focus on connectedness, resilience, self-injury, suicide prevention. I like all the things that make people nervous, which I think maybe is one of the reasons why living in this particular moment in time is dicey and doesn't feel good. And I know we're all scared, but there's also parts about it that are just utterly fascinating and historic.
Well, I think it's important. It's important that you're not afraid to talk about the hard stuff, right? I know you also have the book, the Healing Self-Injury book, and is that part of your work that's primarily focused on young people? And then also, is there the connection to nature? Is that included in that book?
Yeah, I mean, so thank you. The book is really it's targeted at caregivers, so people who live with or love a young person who is self-injuring. I would say the first couple of chapters are really about self-injury so that people know what it is, but it's called a Healing Self-Injury, a Compassionate Guide. And I think that's the core word. Compassion is really the most important part of that book, because the middle chapters could be applied to lots of different topics. It's really just, how do you navigate these dark nights of the soul that can sometimes get very chronic, and without giving up hope, and possibly with, being able to grow and expand as a human. That was really, so the self-injury focus of my research was not planned. It kind of showed up in my life, and whatever reason, I'm like, I don't know, I'm the right person at the right place at the right time. I'll say yes. I did. What I was interested, though, mostly in doing was understanding how dark nights of the soul and the challenges that we all face as humans, especially when they're chronic, can lead to deeper wisdom and a deeper desire to help not just humans, but nature. So the nature focus is just, I personally can't live someplace that doesn't have water and a lot of nature. I need it around me. That has just been something I've known for the whole of my life, and I've been very grateful to have the opportunity to do that. But so the idea that the knowing that nature is sort of pivotal in our mental health is just, it's always been there. And so it gets woven into all of my, pretty much everything I do around mental health. To me, it's axiomatic, right? It's just a given. And so we have to be so mindful about what we're doing on this planet. Because
I think we all, I think a lot of us have we know that inherently. We go out for a hike and we feel so amazing. We come back and go, God, I want to do that again tomorrow. And, and on top of that, you also have like some numbers and some proof and statistics about that, like that it's actually a true thing.
Yeah. So, right. There's now been, so my area of research is really mental health. I have done some work in, like we did some work with schools on how you implement a nature-focused curriculum. But there's a good body of research at this point that's pretty definitively showing that interaction with nature lowers stress hormones. It improves cardiovascular health by lowering blood pressure and heart rate. It boosts immune systems. It increases vitamin D. We all know how important that is. It enhances sleep quality. And of course, it enhances physical fitness, because the best way to interact with nature is to move your body in it. Although it's not the only thing that matters. I mean, when I'm doing work with people around self-injury, inevitably with providers in particular, I'm very careful to be sure to let people know that when they're trying to downregulate, if they're trying to resist the urge to self-injure, one of the best things you can do is get outside into nature and have it be, and interact with nature, because it lowers your arousal pretty quickly.
Also, the grounding, it regulates our nervous system. The electromagnetic field, is we're connected to the earth, with the negative charge and the positive charge. I know they're tweaking your video there, Janis.
Yeah,
hello.
I'm looking at that too. Oh my God.
I think you're over on the edge at the moment.
There
you are. Yay. So did you want to share anything else about that, about the connection there to the actual field? And then I know we want to get into the importance, the fact that the indigenous cultures have always known this, right?
Yes, thank you. So I mean, I guess it's a pretty simple, when it comes to nature and mental health, it's a pretty simple message, which is good, because some of these messages aren't, which is more, the more time you can actually spend in nature, and actually the more time you can put your feet on the ground, like bare feet on the ground, it has an effect. And that the idea of grounding and the reference you just made to electromagnetic systems is a real phenomenon. So I know not everybody has, lives in a place surrounding with nature around like we do here in Boulder, but almost everybody has parks that they can walk to, or some place or trees. I highly recommend that if you're feeling stressed out or anxious, go sit on the ground with your back on a tree. Go take your shoes off and just walk in the grass, or lay on the grass and look at the clouds, and don't look at your device while you're doing that.
Right.
Yes, that's been one of the biggest challenges with young people, right? They're just so wedded to devices. Sometimes they just miss this amazing experience. Mm-hmm. But they're also very worried about the future. So that kind of brings this other domain into focus. That I spend a lot of time thinking about the future. The fish swimming in circles concerns me greatly. And it's not new. We've been seeing an uptick in a lot of odd behaviors and phenomenon, and we all know we're living in a time that's just perilous. I think one of the biggest challenges I see out there in the world is so few adults are validating that for young people. Mm. We just keep teaching them to kind of go on, to keep doing the things that, prepare as though the world of the past is the world we're going into. And I think most of them know that's not likely to be the case. So their anxiety levels are high, even if they're not looking at news all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a disservice, isn't it? And you mentioned something about, the electromagnetic field. I mean, I feel like that might be part of what's happening with the fish, because we're all connected, and the devices are just off the charts. The number the amount of radiation out there is really, really significant, and I think it's affecting every living being.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one. I'll be curious about when we start getting scientists to really look. I mean, even more I think than the fields that we're generating is the stuff that's happening with the Earth and the pole switch, because that's compromising the electromagnetic sheath around the planet, and that has nothing to do with humans. It actually looks like it's something that's happening in the solar system as a whole. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if the electromagnetic sort of degradation of that sheath as a result of what's happening of what they call pole excursions has something to do with it, because it's been fairly well shown, at least in the last, I don't know, half decade or so, that a lot of animals navigate using the electromagnetic grid that is around the Earth, and it's changing. And I can imagine it's very confusing, but I don't know. I'm not sure what scientists are thinking about that. I do hope that is being investigated, because I think that's a reasonable hypothesis. I don't know what we do about it.
It reminds me of when we were kids and we were navigating with an actual compass, right? The reason a compass works is because the electromagnetic field north, and it shows you where north is, right? It kind of goes back to that kind of basic elementary understanding. I would love for you to.
It's wandering away. It's wandering outside.
Yeah, which is a problem. That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love for you to share more about about the indigenous cultures and what they are. They're kind of have seen this coming for a long time. I know that you really have studied some of the prophecies by the Kogi and some things. Would you share some more about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the reasons that I retired when I did is so that I could spend more time putting the puzzle pieces together, because it was very obvious that we are living in an extraordinary moment in history. It's obvious that there are a lot of converging trends and phenomenon that are all coming together at the same time, and not just sort of in a jagged way. They're all apexing at the same time. There's like the crescendo everywhere, and I'm like, this is fascinating. There's something else going on, and it's one of the things. Just to jump forward, I'm happy to go back, but one of the things that after spending years now putting puzzle pieces together, thinking it through, looking at the science, reading the prophecies and the stories, etc., is that a lot of the indigenous ways of knowing aren't just ways of knowing that are not only utterly credible and legitimate, but really important at the moment. We've lost a lot of those mechanisms for knowing things and for acting on those knowings. But they're the holders of this, not just the stories, but the knowledge that we really need right now. So I mean, it's kind of sad in one way, because I'm like, we have such a long way to go to integrate that into the structures that really have the most influence and power on this planet. And yet, I think maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I think it's starting to be kind of visible and obvious. So I run in some scientific circles, and even they are starting to have to stop and say something's going on that's outside of our realm of understanding. And it seems to kind of smell and look like this philosophy, this set of philosophies that revolve around the idea that we're all interconnected, and it's not a philosophical concept, it's a reality. So, for example, I'm sure that you have been, probably a lot of listeners have been following at least some of the headlines that we see periodically about learning how integrated nature is at the fungal system, at the root systems. Like there was just a really fascinating paper that was signed by a whole bunch of different scientists across a number of different disciplines. So I really paid attention. I'm like, this is the structure, this is a power structure. So I want to listen to them. That asserted that there is sentience in all beings, including insects. That was shocking, as that's a far cry from where we have been, honestly. And that's coming from high-level scientists in high-level structures. So I think the seeing in the Avatar way of seeing a movie, that we are all interconnected, and it isn't just humans and informal networks because our bodies meet, but that there are these lines of exchange happening, and that sentience and consciousness is not, well, it's certainly not exactly what we thought it was, and it's certainly not being found in the brain. That was another big event this year. Yeah, finding, like they had, at least there's an ongoing bet between two of the premier people in that space, and the scientist who was absolutely convinced 15 years ago that we would find the seat of consciousness in the brain, had to eat crow a little bit last year. He's not giving up.
Wow.
But
wow.
You can't find it. Probably because
the advancements are incredible, and that what you're saying about even insects having sentience, right, reminds me of honoring all living things, right? All living things, including everything on the earth. The rivers, the fungi, the tree roots, it's and how it's all interconnected, and it's interconnected energetically, right? We are all interconnected with all of that. And that's, I think, one of the things you're saying is that that's what the indigenous cultures have known forever, right? Yeah. And then we kind of get stuck on these high tech, where are we going? And then we forget that. Could you share a little bit more about the Kogi prophecy? If that's
Yeah, the Kogi prophecy is an interesting one, and I'm trying to think of where if people want to go check it out, we can find the link and put it. It was in the beginning of a Ubiquity University talk that Jim Garrison gave a few months ago. But
we can put it in the show notes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What it said is the Kogi are, I think they're an Amazon basin people. I shouldn't remember that. I don't totally remember exactly where they hail from, but they're not people who've spent much time in the wider world. They tend to be, fairly isolative that way, understandably. But they do have a little bit of contact. They have one contact in particular, a documentary maker from the UK who I think at some point found them and did a documentary with them. So they reached out to him, and this is about 2 months old, this memory, so hopefully I'm getting it mostly right. They reached out to him in November of this last year, 2023, and said that they were told by the Earth that it's a little bit sobering, but they were told by the Earth that if the leaders of our planet, that the Earth needs to heal. She needs to heal, and it's not punishment, and she's not angry. It's just she's damaged and needs to heal, and that can happen one of two ways. So the ideal way would be that people recognize, the leaders in particular recognize this, and they endow what I think they refer to as the older brothers. That would be the Kogi and the other indigenous holders of this knowledge, to do the things that they know need to happen in order for the healing of the earth to take place. And that would happen. If that does not happen, and if the world leaders do not by June of 2024, so we're right here, say that they recognize that and start to pave the way for that to happen, that she will have to, in 2 years' time, or 2 years' time or a year and a half, between a year and a half and 2 years' time, take matters into her own hands, basically, and there will be, all the things we're most afraid of, floods and earthquakes
and things where
so like
the earth has to sort of change.
So it's pretty significant, because this is a group of people who really don't wander out of their domains at all, and they came out in order to say this. And so there's some stuff planned for June of this year, as I understand. I don't by citizens to sort of congeal around this concept and pay homage to the earth and say our leaders may not be paying attention, but many of us are. And but they're not the only ones. I mean, the other day, in preparation for one of the Event Horizon podcasts that I was doing, I asked Claude AI to generate all of the instances of stories, like cultural stories and religious and spiritual stories that we have about the transformation, big transformation stories, and look at it linked to the empirical science, or not the empirical science, but the empirical things, events happening right now. And it went on and on and on. There are many stories across the world from many different cultures that say something about this time we're in.
Do you mean some of the positive things that are happening? Like even the Oregon State $10 million grant that Alicia shared with us earlier, you know, that's definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, it's fascinating. There's so much going on with both positive and negative sides. So this prophecy is really intriguing to me, that, and especially that they would have a time frame on it, right?
Right. I mean, and the other thing I think about the prophecies that I don't know, you know, I know it's dicey out there, man. It's an amazing time to be a human. I hope people can be, you know, find the fascination and curiosity, because it really is. But the neat thing about a lot of the prophecies is, although they tend to have some pretty dire predictions, there's in many of them, those predictions yield to a much better moment for humanity and the earth on the other side. It's just, you know, what happens in between. It's a little unclear.
Such an
focus
important
on that
point, Janis.
personally,
Yeah,
and I look for
very.
signs like you're just saying. Yeah, things are happening. People are getting it. I don't know if they're always conscious that they're getting it, but it is happening.
That's a really, really important point, that things are getting dicey and it might get worse, but then on the other side, we really will, I believe, be in a really beautiful place, you know, for the living beings and the planet. And little by little, we're getting there, right? There's all these indicators. I wanted to ask you also, I mean, do you want to dive a little bit into how this affects consciousness? You know, what it really means for the study of, and just not the study of, but for actually people being more aware of what's happening, and then ultimately about, you know, the consciousness of the masses and
sure.
The collective. That's what I was trying to say. Collective.
So let's see. Let's just call consciousness for this, you know, for this exercise, awareness, right? So at the most sort of foundational material way, I think one of the things we're definitely seeing is increased awareness of the complexity of the situation that we're in and the challenges that we're facing. I mean, I have to say, as a psychologist, what I've been most blown away by in this last few years, well, I've been watching things for over a decade, but things have really picked up, right, in the last 5 or 6 years, and been blown away by how much resistance there has been at every level, at the individual level, at the systems level, at the collective level, to just acknowledging that we're entering uncharted territory with some perilous feeling terrain, right? That's been fascinating. So I've also been like, okay, when does this shift? At what point do I start to see that there's acknowledgement? So if that's happening, that we're starting to see the shifts. We're starting to see more news reports. We're starting to see more awareness. I'm starting to see more people talking about climate anxiety in youth, which is something I focus on, and being honest with them about validating that it's true. We're training you based on a past template for a future that may or probably won't have much to. It won't look like it at all. And even if the climate and some of the other more sobering kinds of phenomenon that we're looking at don't really impact us in the next generation or two in a big way, AI and technology will. I mean, there's just a massively shifting landscape in every way. So so that level is happening. I am seeing changes there. I'm also seeing, you know, people having more anomalous experiences. They're having more dreams. They're having more. They're having urges to not do the normal stuff, right? They're having more desire to let go of their stuff in favor of quiet time, experience, reflection, self-exploration, exploration of topics they weren't interested in before. I'm seeing a lot of that, and I'm fascinated with that because I think that's sort of the more amorphous kinds of signs. And then, you know, there's just a lot of stuff on the periphery that's burgeoning science, like the way in which, say, quantum physics is starting to be applied to what we understand reality to be, what we understand human experience to be, what we understand sentience to be. That those links have been slow to come, and there's still a lot of hesitation in the scientific world to apply that to psychology, et cetera. And I understand that, but it's happening anyway, and it's happening with some pretty interesting implications in terms of ideas, and it fits some of the data that we get. I mean, frankly, there's a lot of anomalous phenomena out there that we have basically just said we don't understand, and we're going to push it over there. Well, that bucket, that room is getting really full, and it's getting very hard to ignore.
Yeah, I know. And isn't this what Event Horizon is really about? Your brand new podcast that you just started, and this is kind of the main focus of it. Is that right?
Yeah. Our goal is small, not really. It's to our goal was to try to show people, as my friend and colleague Darren King and I trying to show people, our listeners, all the converging streams that we each individually, before we even knew about each other, we're tracking and paying attention to and noticing. Like, there's interesting points, there's the interesting connection points in a whole bunch of domains. So whether you're talking about the geopolitical domain or the climate domain, or this, what's happening with the sun and the solar system and our poles and the electromagnetic sheath around the earth domain, or whether you're talking about technology and AI, or advances in science, especially the quantum sciences, but not exclusively, or you're talking about mental health changes in mental health and sort of the human registering of stuff, or whether you're talking about I don't know if people pay much attention to this, but there's been massive breakthroughs in archaeology and anthropology in the last, the word unprecedented shows up over and over and over in some categories of science, that being a big one. We're discovering tons about our history we did not know. Anyway, I think at one point I would make a list of 12 things that are these converging strands of ooh, this is really interesting. And they seem to be connected. None of my colleagues would, they would not allow me to stand on that ground. I get it. But to me, I look at them and I'm like, these seem to be connected. And I really want to just play in that space. And I want to talk about and think about not just the challenges facing us, but the opportunities for transformation that are inherent in this moment. And that, for me, because I'm also, one thing I didn't mention is I'm a yogini. So I spent the last 25 years, I don't just mean asana, I don't just mean physical yoga. I mean the teachings of the yogic traditions, and their ideas about reality are very fundamentally different than the materialist view. So
yeah, and
those things come together.
You mentioned that your colleagues might not, appreciate that, but it sounds like you just have an inner knowing that all these things are connected, and then that ties into the teachings of, the yoga traditions.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I now think about that as sort of the story behind the story. And now when I meet people in this domain, I'm like, when did you know you were really weird? When did you know you were different? Because everybody has stories. Like, when I was a child, I had a friend who was an angel, and there's always stories. Now I look back and I'm like, there might have been a reason I tried to rewrite the Bible when I was in third grade. I can't even.
Share that story. Tell us a little more about you.
I don't even know what the story was. I just remember sitting down. I'm in third grade. I've got the Bible. I've got a piece of paper, and I've got a pencil. I think it was a pencil. And I was like, I have no idea what I tried. I just know they got it wrong. I'd never even read that. So, and no offense to anybody who I have no idea what was in my head. I just that was always this odd thing, and it was there was just a lot of odd experiences I had growing up that now, in retrospect, right here, make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would love to hear more about that. Can you think of another example or two of that? I think it's. Like you said, we all have those strange things, but when we look back, I call it the wrinkle in time, right? Yeah. We look back and say, oh my gosh, now I understand why that happened when I was 10 years old, or why I did this when I was 25 or whatever. Do you want to share any of those?
Oh gosh, at some point I made a list, and there were a lot of them on there. One big one that kind of links to here is I remember telling my partner when I was 25, and I wrote it in my journal, and he brought it up later. That when I was about 40, I was going to have to spiritually reconnect. I did not know exactly what that meant. Native American studies have been my minor in college. I've always been I mean, the indigenous ways of knowing are just, I don't know, they've always been close to my heart and something that I was, I paid attention to early on. And then I, started on the sort of mainstream world track, because you have to in order to do, and I wanted to. I was curious about how we work as humans, and how we come together and what we decide evidence is and how all that works. So I did that. I went right into the bowels of all that, and I got a lot from it. But it was, in fact, right around the time I was hitting 40, I started to feel this really strong urge to go to Kripalu in particular, because that was close to where I lived in Ithaca, New York at the time. And it's like a yoga retreat center. And I wanted to get, I got my first mala, which is what you can use to meditate with. I started my meditation practice. I got some chants that I really enjoyed because I love sound as a musician. And I got home and it was like I had to start meditating. And I was, I was an academic, I was a mother, I had a very busy life. I'm like, I just have to do this. Well, that opened the door to all sorts of stuff, an entire, massive shift in life in a lot of ways. And what happened after that really deepened a lot of that. And I can see now how perfect that is here. I remember in high school, I always had flashes of knowing. Like I saw things about my future. It was always decontextualized, but I just saw things and they've all come to pass. And when they usually got there, I was like, oh, I see now. Like at the time that I got the flash, it never made sense. I remember going into the library and searching for information on dimensions. I was trying to figure out the dimensions beyond ours. I was always obsessed with sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, there's a ton of different little things like that. But now that I'm here and I've been talking to people, like a lot of people have that. And we tend to just think of it as, back there behind it. But I'm like, I think that actually might be part of the story of this time. And it'll be really interesting when it hits the mainstream area enough that we start getting authentically curious and not just writing it off. And that's another reason for Event Horizon. Like we hope to be able to gather people who want to merge the Western ways of knowing with all the other ways of knowing and render something that's more authentically helpful to humanity.
I want to ask about the name Event Horizon. What is the event on the horizon?
Well, so thank you for asking about it. Event Horizon is actually a physics term, because that is where the event horizon is where in a black hole, the light goes into the black hole and you don't know what happens next. So it's like we are on an event horizon in which we cannot see really what happens next. We just know it's an event, that there's something happening. So yeah, that's the reason we named it that.
Great. That's awesome. So as you were talking, I couldn't help but wonder what are a few of the most profound things that you honor and learned about the indigenous wisdom, knowing you also studied that?
I mean, all I can say is throughout the course of my life, it gave me extraordinary comfort, because I'm like, then all is not lost. If there's some segment of humanity that can remember what it is that we know that we've lost or that we've shunned or we put away because we need to have this experience. And I say the we very broadly. I know that, lots of us who'd say we weren't the ones who agreed to this experience. So I don't know, at some broad collective level, I suppose we all did, because here we are. But there's always been some segments of us that have held on to those deeper knowings, knowing that I think now, what I see now is like, oh my God, thank God, because we really need that. We will not make this passage if we don't have that. So I have not just honoring, but extraordinary gratitude, because the cost of holding that has been high, right, for a lot of people and a lot of peoples, which is just heartbreaking. So it's not always been easy to touch. I mean, there's just been times where I've worked with folks. I worked with some of the tribes, like in the Northwest in particular, when I was in there, when I was working as a sex educator. And I loved it, but it was hard because the pain is so clear, and the cost was so clear of, you know, all the decisions that have been collectively made. So anyway, I don't know what it'll mean for all of us, and I don't know if it'll be possible to kind of integrate those in the ways that we need it now, but I hope so. And that's where one of the places I default when I need hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's been very hard, not just in this country, but worldwide, of course, for the indigenous peoples. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've been curious too, while we're talking, what was it in your life? Why did you get into this field?
What was it of mental health, that area? Oh, that's a good question. As I said earlier, I don't know. I feel like I realized at some point, I'm like, okay, let's see. I was a sex educator, and then I started studying non-suicidal self-injury, and then suicide. I think I'm attracted to the things that make people nervous, and I do remember that. I remember there was this part of like, well, here's another thing that I experienced. I mean, I was a teenager. There's a number of things that happened as a teenager, but one of them was I remember standing in my room, and I don't remember what I was listening to or thinking about, but I remember thinking, death's not real. It's a shift in perspective. This is not, it's not what people think. But I was a teenager, you know, I didn't even really know what people think. It was just this knowing. So I think that maybe because of that, it just, some of the stuff that scares a lot of people doesn't scare me. It makes me curious. And I'm like, well, let's work on it. Let's come to a deeper understanding together of what's real and what's happening. So it turns out that's a lot easier said than done. There's a lot, as you know, there's a lot of resistance in the world all over the place to which is another interesting conversation, like where did that resistance come from and why does it get reinforced over and over? That took a lot longer for me to puzzle out and come to anything that made sense to me. Don't claim truth, it's just what makes sense to me. But mental health in particular in the last 25 years, because it was really the place that I could. So when the positive psychology movement happened in the late 90s in psychology, it provided a language that we hadn't had before for a lot of the things I was interested in. Mm-hmm. So as I was getting into my PhD program, which again was just kind of this crazy Ivan thing, I did not expect that. But as I was getting into that program, I was realizing there was now a set of languages that we could use to talk about the principles that I instinctively knew were really, really important for human well-being and the well-being of everything. If that hadn't been the case, I don't know if it would have been possible for me to be at all successful in the academic arena, because I really needed to talk about hope and resilience and connectedness. And especially since I'd been working with really high-risk kids and high-risk families for, by that point, a decade. I was a foster mom to a young woman who had all sorts of challenges. Man, it was hard. That was hard. So I was there, and I'd had a hard scrabble childhood. My childhood was not easy. I was a 70s kid. I lived in 12 different places before I was 12 years old. You know, it was a lot of chaos. Born to really young parents, like a lot of us in the 70s, who then divorced a lot of us in the 70s. And that was back when there was no mandate that fathers pay child support. So it was tough. Anyway, it was like a lot of these kids that I'm working with are very wise. Like they have a knowing, and they have a drive to live and prosper that transcends clearly, you know, whatever it is that structures their lives. I want to understand that. And I think that's not me, you know, like I want to understand myself. So the mental health piece was the place that I could do that.
And I know you mentioned earlier the validation of these, how often young people are invalidated, right? It's so important to validate their feelings, their knowing, their wisdom themselves. And you know, I know you had an article. The last thing I want to ask, kind of on this line, is you had an article in Nature magazine. Can you share a little bit about how that came about, and what that's about?
Actually, it was Nature Mental Health, and it's through one of the Icon. Yeah, but it's a subsidiary of Nature, right? So it's a group that I work with called the Jet Foundation. They do suicide prevention. They're awesome in many ways. I like working with them. And I had written a piece, a POV, what they call a point of view on climate anxiety. And one of the folks there reached out and said, do you have, you know, basically would you be willing to contribute or to create this as an article, an op-ed piece, or contribution to Nature Mental Health. Okay, so I feel really embarrassed in saying this, but I really didn't connect Nature Mental Health with nature. The article, I'm like, sure. I mean, I'm happy to write it. It was just it's just an op-ed piece. It's not it's a commentary. So we went through the process, and I think, gosh, I hope nobody at the magazine or the journal is listening, but we got to the point in which they said they wanted it, and then they wanted an image, and we didn't have anything that we could recommend from JED, and so I punted that to them, and they suggested this one image that I think they said at some point was going to cost $500, and I'm like, ooh, that's a very costly image for something like this. And it wasn't until shortly after that process when I went and looked at the publication like real up close. I'm like, oh, this is in Nature. So it's a little bit of an embarrassing story. I should have known that it was. I'm just not. It feels very important for me to give what I came to give. I feel much less invested in what happens after. So I'm really bad at tracking, where anything that I write ends up and stuff. I know that's probably, I don't know. I don't know how that's
okay.
It's just real.
I think that's okay, So Janis, thank you so much for joining us. I have this idea. I want to kind of zoom out, and to look at your career but especially, your real commitment to helping humanity, helping people to understand that getting into nature is really important and having that connection, but also tying in the idea that, these indigenous cultures have known this forever, but also how important it is. It's literally saving lives by having not just young people, all of us, just feel better about things and then do avoid kind of going into depression and feeling negative about things. And so the more we can, and Her Many Voices is always, as you know, committed to this, the more we can continue to raise those voices, the indigenous wisdom and those voices, and share the information and, that kind of thing. I know you're really working on that as well. I love that. I love kind of zooming out and seeing your whole thread. Is there anything that you'd like to share in summary?
Oh, thank you. And thank you for seeing that it is a whole thread. I mean, there's been so many wild parts, and it's been in the last couple of years. It's only been the last couple of years. I'm like, how do I understand the way all these pieces of myself and my sensibilities and my work come together? And especially my felt sense of mission right now. It feels really, really important right now for us to really go inside and get what we need and then make a difference in the world. I mean, I think the only thing that I would love to share is I'm so incredibly grateful to be alive, even though it's dicey, but to be here with so many amazing humans and beings at the moment. It feels really important. And I know that anybody who tunes into this, and certainly all of you at Her Many Voices who put this together and have known this for a while, it feels really important to say thank you so much for your presence and your endurance and your willingness to hold with grace and graciousness what I know has been sidelined and shunned and certainly not given the kind of potency that it needs. But yeah, I think if I were here alone or felt like I was alone, it would be really different. I feel very grateful that there are so many of us that know what needs to happen, and we're just going to keep going along day by day, doing the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Janis. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for that acknowledgement. I mean, I think, Alicia Falls, our founder, and everyone on the team is working so hard, and we really, really have an amazing team here. So thank you so much for that acknowledgement, and thanks for being here. It's an important conversation.
You so much. Thank you for all being you and for inviting me. I was grateful to be here with you today.